Could you just help us understand, in the kind of complex work that you do, what's the mix of input, the sort of mix of work that goes in? And I guess within that, where are you starting to introduce artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so I'm a commercial litigator. So generally what happens is somebody comes to me either because they have a dispute with somebody that they need resolved, or somebody has approached them and claimed that they owe them something. Maybe it's a breach of contract, maybe they've messed up on their accounts or something like that. And a huge part of what we do is finding out what happened, which involves processing in sometimes enormous amounts of data that is not in any way organised, and sometimes we don't even know what it is we're being given. So much of the time we are just trying to figure out what has happened, what data is there, and what can we do with that data.
How have you found that the firm sort of adopted AI? What have been the benefits at a company-wide level, and then how do they look at risk?
The risk is assessed before, I'd imagine, it even lands on my desk, because we deal with so much sensitive data. There's the question of privilege, making sure that when you put client information into the LLM, that you're not waiving privilege so it doesn't become public information. So all of that risk has to be assessed. You've got your data privacy, that's all being analysed, that is above me. But in terms then of how we actually implement it, it's obviously the programs we are using are legal sector specific, sandbox for want of a better word. Anything I put in is protected. I am told that these LLMs cannot hallucinate in the way that, say, ChatGPT is known to do, because they are, certainly the ones that are research-based, are linked to the same legal know-how databases that we would use generally to research case law and things like that.
This episode is brought to you by Instant Impact. Instant Impact provides transformative talent solutions to small and mid-sized companies that are making between 30 and 500 hires each year. If your recruitment's giving you a headache and you don't know where to start, then give the team at Instant Impact a call or visit www.instant-impact.com for more information.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About AI. I'm your host, Felix Mitchell. Now, aligning a business behind the large-scale change required for AI is hard enough already. You need to rewire key processes, rethink your approach to talent, and change the mindset of everyone from CEO to intern. Now, for many professional services firms, there's an extra layer of complexity, the business model itself. Law firms, accountancies, and consultancies have charged by the hour and by the day for as long as I've been in business. So where's the incentive then to bring in technology that reduces project completion time? What happens when the pressure to bill conflicts with the imperative to innovate as a business? Now, Sara Roden is our guest today. She's managing associate at the law firm Greenwoods, and Sara has first-hand experience of bringing in AI at scale and the challenges that accompany that very tension. I'm really looking forward to this one, actually. Sara, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
So let's start with, I'd just love it if you could give us some of your experience of that tension between AI and the amazing efficiency and power that it can bring, and the billable unit of time in law firms.
Yeah. So I think it's almost a bit of a joke, I suppose, among lawyers that we live and die by our billable units. People often make jokes about thinking time on tubes being charged for, which obviously we don't do, and things like that. But it has always been the traditional way that law firms have operated. And to that end, you price accordingly. You are often living by estimates. You perhaps never know how much something is going to cost. And clients can often want you to do things faster or, within a much tighter timescale than might perhaps be possible. And that balancing that against a world where suddenly it's possible and exciting to be able to do things quicker with AI, is really great, because it means that I can do my job in some situations much more efficiently. But at the same time, you have, as you say, this tension as to how on earth is this going to work in the context of what our profit margins are, how our team is structured, And if the people who were previously doing so much of the work that is now being done by AI are effectively redundant, which is the junior level, inevitably, how do you bring people up from the bottom? How do you train them? So there are a lot of things in play.
That's really interesting and just such a complex problem to unpick. I wonder if we could just start with a bit of the history of the billable hour. I'm not talking about the invention and the rest of it, but has there already, like pre-AI, was there already a move away from everything being billable on time?
I'd say so, yes. And I think it probably also depends which sector you're in. So I think transactional lawyers are more inclined, even before the emergence of AI, to do things on perhaps a fixed fee, because, a project might have a value of X, so they're going to charge a percentage of that. Or I know for real estate, sometimes like a certain type of document will be a specific fee. But in the work I do, which is litigation, you just have no idea how long something's going to take, how many documents might turn up, how many witnesses might appear. So we have always, on the whole, been very locked in to the unit or the billable hour. Yeah.
Well, it certainly gives you guys the flexibility that you need, right?
Yeah, I mean, you need it, is the reality. Because if you've promised someone you're going to do it on a fixed fee and then the underlying circumstances completely change, nobody wants to be on either side of that discussion, really.
Yeah, and it's interesting just to help, because we're a sort of generalist podcast here. So we have a bunch of people who their only experience of lawyers watching The Good Wife on weekends. I say that because I'm a massive fan. But could you just help us understand, in the kind of complex work that you do, what's the like mix of input, the sort of mix of work that goes in? And I guess within that, where are you starting to introduce artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so I'm a commercial litigator. So generally what happens is somebody comes to me either because they have a dispute with somebody that they need resolved, or somebody has approached them and claimed that they owe them something for, maybe it's a breach of contract, maybe they've messed up on their accounts or something like that. And a huge part of what we do is finding out what happened, which involves processing sometimes enormous amounts of data that is not in any way organized. And sometimes we don't even know what it is we're being given. I have genuinely, I mean, this was a while ago, but I have genuinely had a secondhand kind of fruit box of papers dumped on me. So much of the time we are just trying to figure out what has happened, what data is there, and what can we do with that data.
And sorry, when you're talking about data, we're talking some of it's interviews, some of it's documents, some of it's spreadsheets.
Exactly.
That kind of unstructured data.
It could be anything. Sometimes it is 3 years of somebody's WhatsApp exchanges with their brother. Sometimes it's hosts of draft contracts that show how some negotiation evolved. It could be transcripts of meeting notes. It could be somebody's personal diary. But you have all these bits and pieces of information, and ultimately we're trying to figure out what happened. And if, as there always is, there's a dispute about what happened, kind of formulating what we say happened, or perhaps it counterfactual. And to do that, you need to have both detail and big picture approach to things. And traditionally, that would be the role of paralegals, junior lawyers. They would learn by getting to grips with documents, by preparing chronologies, by focusing on key areas of interest in a case. And it was a great way to learn, because you were contributing hugely to the ultimate objective. But now that we have these wonderful LLMs, where you can chuck in all these documents and say, I've just given you 3 years worth of meeting notes. Can you tell me what they discussed about what Mr. Jones said about, when they first found out there was perhaps some fraudulent accounting? And this software within 5 minutes goes, they mentioned it on this date. This is what it was about. These are the documents that show. It's completely game changing. And it's brilliant. It's brilliant for getting things done quickly. And
in terms of you can certainly see how LLMs and sort of Gen AI as a whole would be really useful for that kind of work. How successful and how deep has the disruption been already? I guess either that you've seen within your own firm or that you've heard about in other businesses.
I think what it really does at the moment is it gives you a competitive edge against, certainly in my case, the other side. Because if one side has access to this really smart analytical software and the other side doesn't, and we're up against court deadlines the whole time, you have a real competitive edge by having that software. Because as it stands, I think most firms still have their teams of paralegals, their junior lawyers. So it's all running in parallel. Because there are a few firms who have really leaned in heavily to AI, but on the whole, it's an assistant rather than a replacement. Mm-hmm. But I suspect as these things get smarter and better, that might change. But for now, it's a competitive efficiency edge.
Well, law is a really interesting industry because I hope you don't mind me saying this, Sarah. It's not the most trailblazing when it comes to technology and innovation more generally. This is from my experience.
I'd agree completely.
I mean, you could still go to Chancery Lane and see people carting documents around on trolleys. I gather that's the other side of things, but I think what's really interesting about the industry is that it is an industry full of what I call first followers. So whilst there's not a huge amount of innovation going on at most firms, the moment a reputable business does something, all of the other reputable businesses want to get on board and want to find the same thing. But so it feels like a real opportunity for a business to be a little brave and get that sort of 18 months lead on all the others.
Yeah. And there are some, I suppose you'd call them startups, challengers, kind of boutique, smaller firms who are, as I said, really leaning into the AI, and that is fundamentally the core of their model. But so far, it is a case of people bringing it in to help rather than to be the kind of the crux of it. I mean, you might have seen in the legal press recently, there's a partner from a very prominent West End firm who have set up a sports-focused boutique, which will be all about using AI to make them competitive, scrapping billable hours. So it is happening, a real move away from it. But as you say, we're old-fashioned and doddery. And
well, I didn't say I do this. Yes, just for the record. I wonder if just to take it to what you've experienced, you're talking about how you use it personally. How's the firm? How have you found that the firm sort of adopted AI? What have been the benefits at a company-wide level, and then how do they look at risk?
Oh, risk! Thankfully, risk is not my job. The risk is assessed before, I'd imagine, it even lands on my desk, because we deal with so much sensitive data. There's the question of privilege, making sure that when you put client information into the LLM, that you're not waiving privilege, so it doesn't become public information. So all of that risk has to be assessed. You've got your data privacy, that's all being analysed. That is above me. But in terms then of how we actually implement it, it's obviously the programs we are using are legal sector specific. Sandbox, for want of a better word. Anything I put in is protected. I am told that these LLMs cannot hallucinate in the way that, say, ChatGPT is known to do, because they are, certainly the ones that are research-based, are linked to the same legal know-how databases that we would use generally to research case law and things like that. So in terms of that side of it, I think by fact of these being legal sector specific LLMs, there is an inherent safety net in a number of ways. But in terms of how we actually use it on a day-to-day basis, was that the point?
Yeah, that'd be really interesting.
It depends which one there are a lot of them in play. Do you want to talk about the specific?
Let's do it.
Okay, so there's Thomson Reuters. Thomson Reuters are like huge in the kind of legal know-how industry. I think their biggest program is practical law, which, I mean, find me a lawyer who doesn't use practical law on a daily basis. It's fantastic. It has all your legal knowledge, all your precedents, and they have come up with Co-Counsel, which itself is an LLM, but it has tied into it all of their research databases. So you can have this all-in-one portal that you can, plug your client documents in, say that you want to prepare, I don't know, a witness statement in support of an application for a freezing injunction, that it's about, the underlying case is about this specific point that's in this case, and it will it's wonderful. It ties it all in together. It can plow through your underlying documents. It can bring in the structure of how you want it drafted. So it's this all-in-one gateway to everything you need. That's Co-Counsel. Not all of them have the kind of the factual backloading, as it were.
But yeah, I mean, you can feel just from that one example, the amount of work that would have had to go into that same draft.
Yeah,
is absolutely huge. So, how is it in a business that does rely on, I guess, units of time? What do you think the solution is when it comes to, I guess, what the business model needs to be going forwards?
I mean, if I had that answer, then I suspect you'd be putting loads of management consultants out of jobs, because there has to be a kind of, I suppose, a sharing of value in some way. If you as a firm are losing the chargeable time that previously more junior members of staff would have been doing in whatever it is, preparing Scotch schedules or reviewing reams of documents, if that profit or that revenue is no longer going to be coming in, but at the same time you are paying for the AI, which is not cheap, then there has to be a bit of give and take, really. And it's whether maybe you charge to clients for AI services. And I don't know how you quantify that, whether it's a flat rate, whether it's by reference to the value of cases, or you move perhaps to a fixed fee model more generally. But that, as I said, that's so difficult in litigation where things can just blow out of proportion. You could try and do it on a stage basis, I suppose. So it's a really difficult question. It's a really difficult question.
And do you think that it's obviously, I would imagine this is something that every law firm probably in the world is struggling with. I'm sure we'll see some interesting answers for it. In terms of incentive for change, is it quite difficult to actually, because it's weird, because it almost it's converse to most organizations. Most organizations see AI as a way of increasing profit, because they're going to, the cost saving you're going to get is going to be one of the first pieces of value that you get out of the technology, and then you can look at the value add piece later.
Yeah.
Whereas in law, it feels like the sort of speed and the quality of output's their primary driver, and then is actually getting offset, getting put off by the reduction in revenue for it. So have you encountered in your role people say, well, why would we bring in the tech when we're going to get less revenue out of it and the client doesn't really care anyway?
No, I haven't encountered that opinion. And that is because I think everybody recognizes it's very much an adapt or die situation.
Really?
If you don't bring in this tech, you're going to be left behind. You can't compete. Your profit might, or your revenue or your structure, it might change. But that you just have to look at a way, I think, to reset it in a way. Perhaps the more senior staff become more expensive on the basis you don't have the more junior staff. But there's certainly, I have not felt from anybody a pushback against the introduction of bringing AI LLMs into what we do.
Well, that is good to hear. I think you have had your whole career in law. I think is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I think most lawyers are the same, right? You join a grad training program, you get qualified, you become move up the ranks or you go out the sort of paralegal route.
Yeah.
This does feel pretty scary for sort of early career people coming into the industry. What do you think is going to happen there?
I think that is a very good question. And I think we need to be very conscious about how we train people. The reality is, I think it's probably the same in any business. You have to take time out of what you are actually doing on a day-to-day basis to train more junior people. And even though we've been able to kind of, in law, incorporate some of the more document-heavy work to bring them into the team to help them have kind of visibility of what we're doing, maybe it's that they become trained up more early on the AI, perhaps, and they are the people who are dealing with the documents, putting in the prompts, reviewing what comes out, thinking of the questions to ask. So perhaps maybe their training becomes more intertwined. But it does, you can't just write off a whole generation of incoming lawyers. Maybe they're just expected to function at a high level. But that's a lot to ask from people, because it's pretty fast moving. It can be pretty daunting. And I think one of the benefits of some of the work that you do generally do while you're learning is that it gives you a bit of mental space to catch grips with what's happening. So
a little less risky to...
Yeah. Or maybe it's just one of these other big profit questions and we're just going to have to accept that people will be maybe learning on the job without producing or being chargeable while we actually bring everyone up to speed.
Oh, that's really interesting. I feel... It's going to sound really old, but I just genuinely feel quite sorry for this generation of people coming out right now. You know, this is the sort of class, if you will, that were finishing school, starting uni finishing school during COVID. So they got shot. They had a tough time then. Now they're starting their careers just as companies are trying to get their head around what AI means. And I think that this will all sort itself out in the next couple of years, but it certainly won't do anything for, you know, your 18, 19-year-olds coming out of school or your 21, 22-year-olds coming out of university at the moment.
But I suspect they're much better at using LLMs than a lot of people my age. God, I feel so old saying my age. For instance, I still have never used ChatGPT because it was something that obviously everybody else was talking about using. And I genuinely thought, what is the benefit of that to me in my personal day-to-day life? In my work, I can see an obvious, clear benefit to using the legal specific LLMs. Whereas younger people who I think are much more used to, on a regular basis, using ChatGPT, they're going to walk into a law firm and say, I know exactly how to structure a prompt. I know exactly how to deal with the output. I am, maybe I'm more familiar with looking at where it might have hallucinated, where it might have gone wrong, how I can tweak things. So I actually think in a way they're going to come in with a lot of skills that certainly I don't have. And I would think a lot of people my age also probably don't have and need to learn in a way that younger people will be coming in and just be able to do.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. And it kind of feels like the companies that take a risk on those people or see not even taking a risk, sort of see the benefit of that kind of way of thinking and bringing that into their organization. What a huge advantage that will be for the actual change. So we've spoken about the commercial incentives, sort of spoken about career progression and how all of that structure's gonna work through. We've sort of spoken about the tools that you use in the business within law firms. Then, and I know you're sort of mid-market, so we're not talking the sort of very large, probably quite hard to turn around sort of large organizations. But what kind of and it's interesting that you said that everyone's kind of on board with the end point. There's sort of an inevitability about it. But is there a mindset shift that has to happen within law firms for this to actually get adopted at scale?
Completely. Yes. You need somebody to implement it, help people learn how to bring it into their day-to-day life. And I think for a lot of people, it is going to need to be almost forced upon them simply because they're not used to it. And it does make you think, oh, I could sit here and trawl through these. Oh, actually, no, I have this available software. I can do this. And it's actually kind of getting your brain to remember that you have it and it's available, and it will make your life easier. And also, the reality is people have so much actual client work to do. Sometimes sitting down and doing the training and implementing the training you're given, that it does take effort and time, and you do need teams to help structure how it's going to work. Who has it first, for instance? If you just give it to everybody, it potentially becomes a bit of everybody's doing everything with it and no one knows where it's going. Whereas it always needs to be staged, get certain groups used to it. How can they help other people do it? And
totally right. And it's the same with any digital transformation, right? If you bring in any new software and then either people are using it the wrong way, or what I think is worse is you get really low adoption.
Yeah.
And it's kind of been sitting there. And then this sort of, I guess, fallacy springs up amongst organizations being like, yeah, well, it's not adding any value. Like, what's the point of this tool, from people that have maybe used it once or twice. But I think what's really interesting is I saw the news maybe a month or two ago around Accenture making layoffs around consultants who they said were not adopting AI.
Oh, interesting.
Whether that's the real reason or not, I don't know. But it definitely feels like it's going to start shifting over the next year, from here's a tool that might help you to this is the tool you use. This is the process now. And so I guess who maps that out, how that gets determined, that's a very interesting question.
I mean, if you take it back to basics, if you were to go back 20 years, a lot of people didn't even type their own emails. They would, dictate everything and someone else would type it up for them. If you were to try and get a job somewhere now and say, I don't know how to type my emails, I need someone to do it for me, I think a lot of places would be like, no. And I suspect it's going to become very similar with AI. If you say to someone, oh no, I don't want to use Harvey or Lagora, I would rather do everything from scratch myself. Yeah, it just shows an unwillingness to learn, develop. So I completely understand why that approach would be taken, to be honest.
And I guess on the flip side of that as well, I think one of the things that I'm really looking forward to seeing play out in the talent market is if you're working at a business that has adopted all this amazing AI, you're looking for a new job, and then they're suddenly saying, actually, we don't have that AI. You're going to say, well,
yeah,
I have absolutely no interest in writing my own briefing notes again, or whatever it is. So I think it's going to come on both sides of the equation, and it's going to become a really defining part of it.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I think it'll be very interesting to see how it all develops. I was at a seminar talking about whether the courts should be stepping in and looking at how law firms used it, because of course it has a huge impact on how everyone operates. But even from the court's perspective, they were like, it's happening, you got to go with it, you're going to lose out. If you don't, you're going to get left behind. So
leading free market force take the lead. Well, we'll see how that one plays out. So if you had, having a look at time here, I think we're going to have to leave this as the last question. I'm going to give you a real curveball. You had a crystal ball then, and you had to sort of have a guess about the ways that the industry will change because of AI. What do you think it's all going to look like in 5 years?
Ooh, 5 years. That's a long time.
It is a long time.
Gosh,
that was purposeful.
5 years' time. I suspect property work in law firms will be hugely supported by AI, especially on the residential side. I think that'll change dramatically. I think generally training to become a lawyer, you are going to have to have a much better understanding of the extent to which what you will be doing will involve AI, how your client's data interacts with that. We're all going to have to become data privacy experts, unfortunately. And we're going to have to be much more technical. I don't think we can just rely on being academic and book smart. We're going to have to be much more tech savvy than I think so many of us perhaps might want to be. 5 years. I mean, 5 years.
Do you think firms will get smaller?
Do I think firms will get smaller? I think the opposite. The way the market's moving, firms are getting bigger and less in number. So there are fewer firms, but they are all merging together.
Interesting.
There are a number of reasons for that. I think that, but also it's because of the fact that you need AI, you need your data privacy teams, you need your risk teams. And so I think law firms will get bigger. I think they will just become more weighted to the top in a way. And I think the question is how the more junior kind of paralegal admin, and then of course you've got your graduate intake. How does that look? I think that will change.
That's really interesting. I almost wonder whether you're going to get, this is a bit out there, but I almost wonder whether you're going to get a sort of, in the tech world, you have your product managers and your developers are the ones that write the underlying code, and your product managers are the ones that look at the big picture stuff. I wonder whether your lawyers will become your product managers and think about the overarching argument or query things. And I wonder whether your junior rung gets split into trainee ones of those, and then really, really technical people who are writing essentially the prompts and the code base, if you will, for how the legal product gets shipped to the client at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I suppose almost now, because you have knowledge lawyers, you have PSLs, you have people who are working, I suppose, on the more technical side of things. And there is perhaps a good reason why that might become much more bigger, more prominent, more integration into firms, as opposed to being an add-on. It's very much kind of you need us to help you run the strategy for the client. So possibly, yeah.
Very interesting. There was, just to share a tiny anecdote from ages ago, because this tech is not, it's particularly law, it's kind of been kicking around for a bit. I was speaking to, and this must be a decade ago, speaking to a firm of barristers, believe it or not. And they were using really advanced data science to map how specific judges responded to specific arguments and words that barristers used in their arguments. Where they got with it, I have absolutely no idea. But it definitely feels like there's so much scope as well from the sort of cost saving side of things, but also from the where can we put in extra value, where can we get new insights, where can we do X, Y, and Z.
So there is a program called Solomonic, which basically data maps everything that happens in the High Court. So who the judge was, who the barristers were on each side, who the experts were, what the outcome was, what they said in the judgment about this person. So, and that has been very useful, I think, from a number of aspects, whether it's that, you've got the same person on the other side, or you've got that judge for a specific case, or just you've got a new client and who else is suing him, who's he acted for him before. So that sort of data mapping is incredibly valuable to people. Yeah.
I'm going to check that out. Well, Sarah, I'm afraid that's all we got time for. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Sure. It's nice. It was really enjoyable.